Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker University podcast series. My name is Jane Atkinson. Today's topic, Lessons from the Road Warrior, has us looking at a large multi-city engagement from the beginning, what did it take to book a big contract, to the execution of the engagements, and finally to the lessons learned along the way. Our guest expert, Joe Calloway, will share with us lessons from the road. Now, as many of you listeners already know, Joe is the author of Becoming a Category of One, amongst many other great books, and has embodied the Category of One in his own speaking business. He also partners with me, I'm very fortunate, at the Wealthy Speaker University for our Master's Platinum class, where our clients get some really amazing coaching on their business and presentations. We'll talk more about that at the end. So welcome, Joe. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Jane. It's great to be with you.
Well, you just came off a 27-city tour for one company. And tee it up so our listeners understand how this engagement came to be.
Okay. First of all, Jane, it's the best contract I ever had in my 30-plus year speaking career. I mean, this was a great, great contract, and it was a bureau-booked job. So I got this through a speaker's bureau. The short answer as to how I got recommended, because the bureau recommended more than one speaker for the client to choose from, which is typical when a client books through a speaker's bureau. But the reason that they recommended me is that they know me. I've done work with them for over 20 years. I'm talking about the bureau here. Mm-hmm. And so they thought I was a good match content-wise. And the main thing is they had confidence. I mean, they just had confidence. And there's no way to get to that place except, do your best to do a really good job over a period of time. So the trust was there, and that's what got me in the batch of speakers that the Bureau recommended. And then from that point on, there was a process involved.
So they narrowed it down to you and 3 other speakers at one point. Did you see them face to face? Was it a telephone meeting? What took place after that? And what kind of questions were they asking you?
It was a telephone meeting. They had telephone meetings with each of the finalist speakers that, got down to the last 4 that they chose from. And I think part of it was they wanted to get a sense of, they just wanted to get a sense of me, Jane. Mm-hmm. And on one level, they wanted to know, they thought, we're going to be spending 12 weeks with this guy on the road. How is he going to be to work with? And so they wanted to get a sense of my personality off stage, just to know, just kind of what I would be like to work with. Then, of course, and with this client, they had some specific directions they wanted to take the content. So they really honed in on, would I be able to take my background and my expertise in business and use that to help them accomplish very specifically what they wanted to accomplish with these presentations. And so the calls, Jane, and there were 2 or 3 calls with about 5 people from the bank, and they were very focused on content, a little more content intensive even than a lot of other calls that I've had, pre-event calls I've had with clients, because this ended up being, for me, 90% a brand new program. I pretty much wrote this thing from the ground up.
Did you have some concern at some point in the process here that this was going to be a difficult contract?
I did, and it was unfounded. My concern was, just based on past experience, that with so many people having input into it with me, ultimately, at one point, Jane, I had a conference call with over 20 bankers. It was a big bank that hired me, 20 bankers around the country that I went over my outline of the program, and then they all got to give their input. And I thought, this is going to be a nightmare. I'm afraid the client's going to try and micromanage, and probably every speaker listening to this has had that experience where the speaker almost takes over your presentation and says, we want you to say this, we want you to say that, we want you to talk about this. But luckily, it turned out, as I said, to be really unfounded. The client was a dream to work with. All of their input turned out to be nothing but helpful. It helped me do a better program. I mean, from a personality standpoint, they were delightful to work with. And yeah, I had some misgivings on the front end, but it turned out to not only not be a micromanaged, difficult event, it turned out to be one of the best, most pleasant experiences I've ever had in my speaking career.
Wonderful, wonderful. So they task you with, okay, we've got these 200 or 300 small business owners coming into every city, and we want you to hit on the following points. Yeah. How did you develop the content from there? What kind of time was involved in you actually putting together this? Because it's going to be 27 cities. Obviously, you want it to be a great speech.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. There was a lot riding on this, and I put a huge amount of time into the development of it. But the thing I had going for me on that side, Jane, is I work on my material all the time anyway.
Right.
I mean, a lot of other speakers take the approach that they need to spend most of their time marketing. My approach has always been I need to spend most of my time working on my material, making it better, because that is my marketing. When I do a speech, that's where my jobs come from, is recommendations, word of mouth, all that stuff. So I'm very comfortable with, and I actually really enjoy the research and development part of this business. And so putting the presentation together, and involved tons of research on the internet. Looking for examples to illustrate the points that I was making. Looking and seeing if there was material in any of my existing presentations that I could adapt to this. And it was funny, I did, and a lot of the people listening to this had been through it. This was to be a 1-hour presentation. I ended up literally with about 3 hours worth of material that I said, here it is. And so, of course, I had to whittle down.
Right. Wow.
I had to go from 3 hours to 1 hour. And ultimately, it was a presentation that I fell in love with, to the point that it's going to really change the way I go to the marketplace from this point on.
That's fantastic. So what about just the getting from place to place and the logistics? I mean, we called this kind of Diary of a Road Warrior. What would you say was the highlights of the tour, and what would you say were the lowlights of the tour?
It was an interesting one, because what we ended up doing was rolling a set lump sum to cover all my expenses. Mm-hmm. And I booked everything. I mean, I booked everything. Wow. The hotels, the air travel, the car rentals. And here's another interesting thing, Jane. The events were almost all held in hotels. A couple of them were held in great big, for example, the New Orleans one was done in a big country club. And a couple of them were done in conference centers. But sometimes the hotel where the event was being held was sold out. They didn't have any rooms for me, because remember, these are local events, and everybody that attended was just going to drive to the event.
Right.
I was the only one from out of town, me and a couple of people that worked with the client. But there were times when logistically I would have to get a hotel and then either have a rental car or take a taxi to the hotel where the event was being held. So there were lots of little quirks. They did a great job of scheduling, for example. On Wednesday, I was in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Thursday, Detroit, Michigan. Friday, Chicago. Well, for that, I could either fly from Grand Rapids to Detroit to Chicago. I chose to drive. I just got a rental car. And so all of that stuff was up to me. The client did not dictate how I got anywhere. That was all completely my choice. There were some cities where my hotel room was $129. There were other cities like San Francisco, like the last one, which was in Manhattan, where my hotel was about $600.
Wow.
And, that was coming out of my allotment. But, that's the way it goes. Sometimes if you've got a set fee for expenses, sometimes you go in the hole on that. Sometimes you make a little money on that. But over the long haul, it tended to even out. But there were a lot of logistics involved. I worked for almost 2 days solid, just setting up nothing but the travel. And I did that myself.
Wow.
Nobody did it for me.
Wow. Now, in hindsight, let's say if you were to take one part out of that, how about take out the hotel and say, okay, you guys do the hotels, I'll do the rest. And that way you're in the hotel where they've booked the engagement. They're going to find room for you there. There's not as much stress on you that way.
That's true, except that some of the hotels where they did the engagement were sold out when they booked the engagement.
Oh, wow.
I mean, sold out in terms of rooms.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's funny, I'm very hands-on about my travel. I don't want anybody else doing my travel. I don't have anybody that works with me that does my travel. I know what I like. I know how I like to do it. I know the times of day that I want to be on a plane or not on a plane. And so actually I was pretty comfortable doing it all myself, although it was very time intensive to get it all set up.
Sure. Okay, so let's talk about the response. Was it the same in every city? I mean, you're going north, you're going south. I'm sure people responded differently. How did they differ for you?
Very interesting to me, Jane, that the response was, just within a few, if you wanted to put a quantification on it, within a few percentage points of being pretty much the same in every city. And it was great. Now, different parts of the country, it's funny. For example, people would say, well, a week ago last Friday, I did the final one. It was in Manhattan. And there were even people that came, attendees, audience members that came in that said, well, this is going to be your toughest audience because, we're New Yorkers and we're just tough. Oh, good grief. They were sweet as they could be. They were no tougher than the people in Houston, Texas or anywhere else. The reaction was pretty uniform and luckily it was good. Now, let me tell you one thing that helped. I worked very hard at finding something at the very opening. I did not open with content. I opened with some way for me to personally connect with that city, with the people in that town.
So give us an example of that.
An example, okay, here's one of the best examples. And you have to know a little bit of the history of NFL football. In Houston, Texas, I got up and I said, God, I feel bad because I'm from Nashville. And 16 years ago, we took your NFL football team away from you. And I just feel bad about that. So here's what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to trade your old team back to you for the team you've got now. Now, if you know what's going on in football, you know that the Nashville football team, the Tennessee Titans, are about as bad as they could be this year. Houston's team at the time I was giving the speech was doing pretty well. And so when I gave them that line, they all laughed and they booed. And I said, well, okay, how about this? I'll trade you our entire team for J.J. Watt. Yeah. And who's this fabulous defense player for them, linebacker. So they all laughed and laughed and laughed and they booed again. But the mood in the room immediately shifted to, okay, we're buddies with this guy.
Yeah.
And I was able to do something that tied into that city locally with every single one of them, and it made a big, big difference.
That's a lot of work to come up with 27 different openings. I mean, I know you're not doing a lot, but you're doing, a minute or two that is going to be very unique to them. So, that's probably a very big reason for this outstanding result, don't you think?
it was certainly one of the reasons, and let me tell you where I've got an advantage there, Jane. I read all the time. And I don't just read business. I read cultural stuff. I read when I'm on an airplane, I will when they at the end of the flight, when they're taking up all the recyclables and stuff, they hate me because I'm giving them 5 newspapers. I'm constantly on the internet checking the news, and it's not just business, although that's my job. That's my focus, is to understand business. You can put me in any major city in the country, and if there's something going on in that city, I know what it is because I've read about it. So I don't know. I just feel like that gives me an advantage. That gives me an edge competitively. I read all the time. I'm constantly researching.
Very good. Very good. So let's talk about kind of the overall lessons that you might have learned by doing this. First, would you do it again? And if so, would it be different? And what lessons did you learn along the way?
I think the biggest lesson was a reinforcement, which was if you're doing a job that's this big a deal to the client, because it was very, very important to them. And especially if you throw in, you're going to be on the road, at least when you show up at the hotel for the event, the same 2 or 3 people are going to be there every time. So you're going to be working very closely with these people. And it really reinforced how important it is to me. Would not be as important to other people, but it is to me, that these be nice people, that they not be jerks. Because, Jane, there are other people that say, I don't care if they're jerks or not. If their check clears the bank, I'll make it work. I'll work with them. But it's very important to me to work with people that are nice to work with. And so, having been a little bit spoiled by this job, it just makes me want to make my filter that much more important, that if I get a gut feeling that these people are too stressed out or wound too tight or mean, right, I don't want to work with them. I don't want to work with them. I will walk away from the job.
Nice. And so, one of the things that I talk to my clients about is creating your qualities of your perfect client. So on your list is that they're nice people. Maybe you want to have some fun with them, so they're fun to work with. Yeah. And then also that they don't micromanage, but yet they are very clear on what outcomes they want, because you've probably had it on the opposite end of the spectrum where they didn't know what the heck they wanted, and that was also a big problem.
Jane, I had a hotel client one time say, just come do your thing. I can't work that way. You've got to give me a context. I've got to know what's going on. So yeah, you're right. To get good direction from a client is so valuable because it enables you to just do that much more effective a job for them, and you end up being the hero.
Right. Yet, had you had to have another 5 meetings with 20 more people on the line, that would have felt like micromanagement, and I'm sure it would have seemed cumbersome. So now we're kind of getting your list of who your ideal client is more refined. What about actually doing this type of tour? I know how important Annette and the girls are to you. So what if you broke it down and you said, look, I'm happy to do the engagement, but I won't do it all at once or something like that. Do you think that would be possible?
Well, I think with some jobs it would be possible. With this job, it wouldn't be as possible because they've got basically a 12-week period that they want all these cities done. It's either 2 or 3 cities a week for 12 weeks. And for me, that was a big decision because I used to travel. I used to do 5 cities a week, way long time ago. But now I've got these 2 girls at home and Annette, and I don't want to be gone that much. So it was a big decision for me to take on this much travel, but it was one time. It was a very lucrative contract, and that did enter into it. I blocked out all of December. I'm not going anywhere in December except to Toronto, which is a fun trip that I'm very excited about, to be with you and everybody at CAPS. and I've blocked off a big chunk of January. So yeah, you have to look at what your parameters are and be sure you're comfortable with it. But that goes for any job.
Yeah. And I think that there are young speakers probably listening on the line who they're after 70 or 80 engagements a year. And when they're single and maybe don't have small children at home, that is doable. You certainly did that once in your career. But now, what do you think your sweet spot sits at? Somewhere between 40 and 50 maybe?
Yeah, I think it's 50. Yeah, that's exactly it, Jane. I always shoot for between 40 and 50. Mm-hmm. And I've been very, very fortunate in that the last few years since I set that as the range, I've come up, ended up doing 50 or a few more. But that's okay. That's manageable. I'm okay with that.
Good. Well, I think that you've given them lots of great content here to think about, and I really want our listeners to have maybe even go back and revisit the part where you're talking about how you developed individual, specific, customized content for each of those 27 cities, and what it took, hours and hours and hours of preparation that went into this, because I think that having true relevant content is absolutely the key to your success, don't you think?
That's the key word. I have to stay relevant. It's a double-edged sword having done this for a long time. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, a lot of people in the business know who I am. On the other hand, I could very easily be yesterday's news. It's like Joe Calloway. Yeah, we've used him for years, but we want something new. And there are so many good new speakers in this business. I mean, they make my head spin. They're so good.
That's why you're constantly reinventing yourself, though, right? To stay on that cutting edge. And I've heard Chris say it. Chris Young, who's our partner in Masters Platinum, has said she has not seen you do better work than you're doing here in your 30th year. So I think that's something to really be proud of. And, that's a message for people who are just starting out, that this is a, what do we call it? A marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, true. And relevance is a key. If you're not relevant to the marketplace, you're gone. It's over. So that's what I think about all the time.
Yeah. Well, I want to just thank you again for participating. This will be our second year in launching the Wealthy Speaker University's Masters Platinum program. We look for speakers who have been in the business for more than 5 years, seasoned speakers earning more than $5,000. Joe, you helped us launch it last year in Las Vegas. This year we're doing Atlanta, March 27th through 29, I believe are the dates. What do you think the people who have come through, they've talked to you 2, maybe 3 times now, and had some coaching around presentations and content and relevance, what do you think they've gotten out of it?
Well, this is so much fun for me. It is so creatively juicy for me. And the thing that I have loved in the one-on-one sessions that I've had, because there are a lot of different parts to Masters Platinum. They get to work one-on-one with you, one-on-one with me. Of course, the kickoff event, which is so powerful. But with me, it is focused mostly on their presentations. And there are some of them that we have done some absolutely incredible work in transforming their presentations into something that is just bumped it up a whole new level. And for things, for me to be able to have an outside perspective and say, hey, listen, Jane, what if you went down, see that 8th paragraph, 8 paragraphs into your presentation? What if that was your opening? And then hear a long pause and have the speaker say, oh my God. Oh my gosh, that's it. That's it. That is my opening. And it's not that I'm a genius, but I've been doing this a long time. And I've studied what makes a presentation work. And I try to bring it obviously to my own presentations. And that has really been fulfilling for both of us, for me and for the speakers. to be able to, and I'm telling you, and you know this, these are good speakers that we were working with. I mean, really good. And for us to be able to help them bump their career up to the next level is a very fulfilling thing.
It's so fun. Well, I'm so grateful that you're on board with us on that. So if anybody would like to get more information, go to wealthyspeakeru.com or just drop me an email, jane@speakerlauncher.com. We'll typically want to talk to people before they sign up for that. Joe, thank you so much. I think you've given people some excellent advice, things to think about, and maybe even dream that, okay, if I'm going to get my 27 city engagement, it may not be in year 1 of my career. It might be in year 5 or year 7 or year 10. Thank you so much for your time today, Joe Calloway. I appreciate you.
My pleasure, Jane. I feel the same.
Thank you very, very much. And for now, we'll see you soon, Wealthy Speakers.